So, prices go up and supply goes up. It's basically the most fundamental rule of economics, and pretty much everybody knows it. But what if I told you that this ironclad rule completely falls apart the moment 9 hidden, invisible things in the economy unfreeze? In this explainer, we're going to pop the hood and look at the engine operating right beneath the surface of the law of supply. Because the wild truth is, this rule really only holds together if we deliberately freeze the world around it. We're going to see exactly what we're freezing and why the rule absolutely shatters the second those factors start moving.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the law of supply itself, then explore how we literally freeze time with a concept called ceteris paribus. After that, we'll unpack those 9 hidden assumptions, talk about why we even make them in the first place, and finally, decode the massive difference between a movement and a curve shift.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, the law of supply.
So the core equation here is incredibly straightforward. When the price of a good goes up, the quantity supplied of that good goes up right along with it. It's a direct, positive relationship. And the why is pretty simple, right? Producers are entirely motivated by profit. If the market price for whatever you're making suddenly jumps, you're instantly going to want to offer more of it for sale. Ramping up production is the most direct way to boost those profits. That's the law itself, but honestly, it is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Which brings us to Section 2, freezing time, or ceteris paribus.
Now, you might have heard the term ceteris paribus before. And it isn't just some throwaway Latin phrase designed to make economists sound super smart. It literally translates to other things being equal. But in practice, it means we are deliberately locking every single other economically relevant factor perfectly in place. We are completely freezing the world. You see, a supply curve is a relationship between two and literally only two variables, quantity and price. To map those accurately on a graph, you absolutely have to assume that absolutely nothing else is changing around them.
Let's look at exactly what we're freezing in Section 3, the 9 hidden assumptions.
These assumptions are basically our master list of what's getting locked down. First up, we assume the price of related goods is totally constant. Just imagine a farmer growing wheat. If the price of sugarcane suddenly skyrockets, that farmer is probably going to switch his fields over to sugarcane to chase those big profits. The supply of wheat drops, but it had literally nothing to do with the price of wheat, so we have to freeze related prices to isolate the wheat. Second, we assume zero change in technology. If that same farmer gets a brand new, super advanced harvesting machine that just naturally doubles his output, supply shoots up. But again, a price increase didn't cause that, better tech did. So we freeze technology. Third, the cost of production has to stay constant. If worker wages drop or raw materials suddenly get cheaper, a producer can supply way more product at the exact same market price, just because it's cheaper to make. So yep, we freeze those factor prices too.
Moving right along, Assumption 4 is that taxation and subsidy policies remain completely unchanged. Think about it. If the government suddenly slaps a massive tax hike on a product, or maybe cuts excise taxes, that is going to wildly shift how much producers want to supply, totally independent of what the consumer market price is doing. Fifth, we assume no change in the scale of production. We have to pretend the producer's plant size and overall capacity are completely fixed for the period we're looking at. If a company just finished building this massive factory expansion, they're obviously going to pump out more goods. But that extra output is because of the new factory, not a change in the market price. And sixth, the number of sellers in the industry has to remain constant, because if 10 new competitor firms enter the market tomorrow, total supply jumps at every single price point, whether the actual market price moved or not.
Now, number 7 is super fascinating. No speculation about future prices. We have to assume producers aren't trying to look into a crystal ball. Because if a producer expects the price of their good to double next month, they might actually hoard their stock and supply less today, even if today's price just went up. Expectations make supply behave really weirdly, so we freeze them. Number 8, the producer's main objective must be profit maximization. The whole logic of higher price equals more supply relies on a rational seller chasing profits. If you've got a state-run enterprise selling subsidized food at a fixed, loss-making price just for public welfare, well, they're completely ignoring the law of supply. And finally, number 9, transport and market entry costs are constant. If fuel prices surge and it suddenly costs a fortune to just truck goods to the market, the actual supply reaching the shelves is going to drop, even if the factory gate price of the good went way up.
So, that brings us to Section 4. Why make assumptions at all?
Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. The real world never actually freezes. Technology advances literally every day. Taxes change, fuel costs are constantly bouncing around, so why on earth do economists make these rigid assumptions in the first place? Well, it's to deliberately isolate cause and effect. This is absolutely crucial to understand. Economists don't live in a fantasy world. They don't actually believe these 9 things are permanently frozen. But without these assumptions, you absolutely cannot isolate price as the real cause of a supply change. In the real world, dozens of things are influencing supply at the exact same time. These assumptions are just a deliberate simplification device. It is essentially the scientific method applied to economics. You lock everything down to study just one variable's effect in total isolation. And once you understand exactly how price affects supply in a total vacuum, then you can start relaxing those assumptions one by one, adding in new tech, shifting some taxes to build a much fuller, much more realistic model of the actual economy.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, movement versus curve shift. All right, I want to shift gears for a second here, because this is a direct warning. We need to look at what is probably the single biggest misconception in this entire topic. If you're ever taking an economics exam, this is the exact trap they are going to set for you. You have a change in quantity supplied on one hand and a change in supply on the other. They sound totally identical, but they are entirely different beasts. A change in the price of the good, and literally only the price, causes a movement along the existing supply curve. That is a change in quantity supplied. But the second you unfreeze any of those 9 assumptions we just walked through, say there's a breakthrough in technology or a sudden tax cut, that causes a change in supply. And that means the entire curve shifts to the left or the right. It changes the supply at every single price level, not just at one single point. If you mix these 2 things up, you're missing the entire mechanical foundation of how markets are modeled. Just remember, price moves you along the line, changing an assumption moves the whole line.
Understanding these hidden assumptions is really what separates just memorizing a textbook law from actually understanding how economic models are built from the ground up. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. If the real world never truly freezes, how many of those 9 assumptions do you think changed in our global economy just today? Think about all the shifting technologies, changing wages, and fluctuating transport costs happening all around the world right this second. It really makes you realize that a true understanding of economics means looking at the real world and recognizing the constant, complex motion of all these hidden variables working together at once.